This unit, we have spent a great deal of time talking about slope and graphing lines. This piece of paper you should have on your desk if that's what you're working on. And we're going to go over, I'm going to quickly review how to calculate the slope as well how to graph a line in slope-intercept form. So if you want to go ahead and first flip your paper over that way, or you can write it up top here. And I do apologize, my dog is barking in the background, so it gives you nice ambiance music here for us. But if we first talk about the word slope, whenever you hear the word slope, you need to think of four things. The first thing you should think of is the variable. The variable for slope is m. The next thing you should think of is that when you find the slope on a graph, you want to think of the phrase blank over blank, which is rise over run. You also, when you have two ordered pairs, you want to think about the slope formula. Remember, the slope formula is y1 minus y2 over x1 minus x2. And the last thing you want to think about when you're finding the slope is you want to think about, what does slope mean? What does slope tell you about the line? Well, slope determines the steepness of a line. It's the steepness of a line. Okay? So those are the four main things. These three things are the most important. M, rise over run, and then the formula. So if I come down here and I look at my worksheet, I'm going to do just a few problems and then you're going to do the rest. If I look at number 1, and I'm going to actually zoom in so I can see number 1 really carefully here. Okay. So if I look at number 1, to find the slope, I want to do rise over run. So I start at my lowest point, and I do rise over run. So now I'm going to count how many squares I rose. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And I'm going to count how many squares I ran. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So because I ran to the left, it's -6. So m equals rise over run. So how far did I rise? 5. How far did I run? -6. But remember, we like the negatives on the top, so we just erase the negative from the bottom and put it on the top. If I look over here at number 2, with number 2, notice I don't have pretty points, so you'd have to pick your pretty points. Remember, your pretty points are always through the corners of your box. So I believe I picked this point here and this point here. Okay, so I want you to try to do that problem on your own. I'm going to instead go down and look at number 3. Number 3, I don't have a graph, so with number 3, I want to use the formula, y1 minus y2 over x1 minus x2. So I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to label xy, xy, so I don't forget which is which. So now when I set up the formula, I'm going to do y1, so my first y value is -1, minus my second y value, which is -2. So those are my y values. So now I'm going to do my denominator, and my denominator is x1 minus x2. So my first x value is 6, minus my second x value is 4. So now I have two negatives in the middle, which make a positive. So -1 plus 2 is 1. 6 minus 4 is 2. So I know m equals 1/2. Okay? So if I go ahead and I do one more with you, number 4. Again, I like to label my x's and my y's. That way my brain doesn't accidentally mix up the wrong letter. It really does help tremendously. So m equals, my first y value is 4, minus my second y value is 3. My first x value is 5, minus my second x value is -5. So that turns to a giant plus. So 4 minus 3 is 1, and 5 plus 5 is 10. So m is 1/10. Okay, so I want you to go ahead and do number 2 and number 6 on your own. You can wait until I finish going over the rest of this video, or you can do it now. So now we want to talk about graphing equations in slope-intercept form. So you did this with your last class when we were talking about the equation y equals mx plus b. Y equals mx plus b is the most famous equation of a line. It's the most simplest way to graph a line. Because we know m, we just calculated, stands for slope. And we know b stands for the y-intercept. And the y-intercept is where the line crosses the y-axis. Now, M is always next to X as my coefficient, and B is always alone. It's always my constant. However, that only works as if Y is 100% isolated. So if I look at number 7, Y is alone, so I can instantly go ahead and find M and B. So M is always next to X, so the coefficient of X is negative 2/3. B is always alone, it's always my constant, so my constant in this problem is 3. So now I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to graph. So if I wanted to graph, I always go in alphabetical order, so B comes before M. So I'm going to graph B. B is my y-intercept, so it goes on my y-axis. And then from this point, I'm going to rise 2, run 3. Rise over run. Now, because it's negative, I'm going to not rise up, I'm going to rise down. And I always run to the right. So I put my pencil on my B, and I rise down 2 because it's negative, and I run to the right 3, and I plot that point. Except it went a little off here, okay? So now I'm going to do that same thing. Rise 2, so I'm going to go down 2 because it's negative, run to the right 3. I always run right, I never run wrong. You have to have at least 3 points on your graph if possible, and then you connect your dots. Make sure you have 3 points, you have arrows, and your dots are connected. So I'm going to go ahead and do one more with you here, number 9. Notice number 9 is in y equals mx plus b form because y is 100% alone. So m is always x's coefficient. It's always next to x. So what number is hiding in front of x? Well, negative 1. Well, I'm going to turn that into a fraction so I can do rise over run. So I can turn anything into a fraction by putting a 1 underneath it. B is my y-intercept, which is 2. It's my constant. It's alone. So I'm going to plot B on the y-axis. And then because it's negative, I go down 1, right 1. Down 1, right 1. Down 1, right 1. I have to have 3 points at least. And hopefully connect your dots. And I'm done. So then I now need you to go ahead and you need to do number 8 and number 10. So you're going to finish this worksheet. You're going to do 2, 6, 8, and 10, and then you're going to come have your answers checked.